has been called a lot of things by law enforcement. He's been called the East Side Rapist. He's been called the Visalia Ransacker, the original Night Stalker, and the Golden State Killer.
The place is Sacramento, California. The year 1976. A peaceful city with a growing suburb surrounding it. Children playing outside. It had the feel of a safe small town, where when the lights turned on, it was a signal to all the children playing outside that it was time for supper. The townspeople didn't know at the time that this would all come to an end. It all began on June 18, 1976, when a man wearing a ski mask raped a woman in Rancho Cordova. And just a month later, another woman was raped in Carmichael's Del Dio neighborhood. And so it began. In just 4 months, 8 incidents of sexual assault had happened in the Sacramento area. He didn't leave a single fingerprint behind, and no one had seen his face. This made it difficult for the local police to catch him, and he would go on for the next 40 years without a shred of evidence pointing to who he may be. This is the story of the Golden State Killer. At first, he wasn't known as the Golden State Killer. He had multiple names, a name for every reign of terror he brought upon different parts of the state. His crimes have allegedly started before the days in Sacramento County. The police have now been led to believe that he started in 1974 in Visalia, California, and was known as the Visalia Ransacker. He started with petty theft. He would break into the homes and take small items, ransacking through closets and leaving a trail of mess in the homes he burglarized. This escalated to violent and sexually motivated crimes, but sadly ended with murder. A father, Claude Snelling, who was attempting to save his daughter from the deranged ransacker, was shot twice after he heard some noise coming from his daughter's room at 2 in the morning. As a response, the police went on nighttime stakeouts near houses that were previously prowled. But after he committed his first murder, he still continued to ransack more homes. But during his last burglary, something would happen that would change the course of his crimes. A mother who suspected a prowler in her backyard after seeing a footprint left behind in the mud had called the police. The police organized a stakeout around the house. When they saw the prowler, Officer McGowan ran after him and told him to freeze.
25 got you out there, and 25 got you out there also. C7.
And that's when the man started to scream and plead with the officer not to shoot or hurt him, and the man slowly with his right hand started to lift his ski mask off his face. McGowan now sees the ransacker's face for the first time. During those few seconds, the ransacker quickly lifts his gun with his left hand and shoots McGowan before escaping into the night. Officer McGowan suffers an injury to his eye, but could describe what the ransacker looked like. And finally, Visalia's police department had a sketch for the ransacker. But that was the last time they would hear of any other burglaries in the area. It was like he disappeared into thin air. But as soon as the ransacking stopped, a few months later, the sexual assaults on lone females followed in the suburbs east of Sacramento, Rancho Cordova, Carmichael, and Citrus Heights. This would go on for years. They called him the East Area Rapist. The whole community shook at the monstrosity of his crimes. He didn't only rape and burglarize homes, but he stole the community's innocence. Everyone lived in fear. He escalated to attacking homes of couples shortly after. He would bind the men with rope and set a plate in the way that if the man had moved, the plate would fall and break. It was his own alarm system. On later dates and even years, he would call his victims and threaten them. Even though the phone calls were recorded, the police had no indication who it may be. There were multiple accounts of people claiming that there was someone following them or someone hiding near their homes, but the police in Sacramento were never able to get any sort of identification. The only sketch they had was of a masked man. But things escalated in 1978 when a young Sacramento couple, Brian and Kate Maggiore, walking their dog in the Rancho Cordova area, had a confrontation with a man breaking into a house, and unfortunately this altercation led to both of them being shot dead. This was later believed to be the East Area Rapist because the area was close to his hunting grounds, and the police found some pre-tied shoelaces that were dropped next to the bodies. The FBI confirmed in 2016 that they were indeed killed by the East Area Rapist. The East Area Rapist continued to commit his crimes in Sacramento County and the surrounding counties between 1976 to 1979, jumping from one county to the other every few months. Shortly after the last rape in 1979, the East Area Rapist vanished, but another series of crimes started in Southern California. He first hid in Santa Barbara County and is believed to have committed most of his 12 suspected homicides while still raping women, but now also shooting or bludgeoning them to death before he left the house, and often killing their boyfriends or husbands as well. People started calling him the Night Stalker, but then similar crimes started in the same area, and when they realized it was being committed by two different people, they coined him the name the Original Night Stalker. His last known crime occurred in 1981. Then a lone rape and murder happened in 1986, and then it all suddenly stopped. Investigators in Southern California did not think all of those crimes were committed by the East Area Rapist. The Santa Barbara County Sheriff's Department believed it was caused by a local career criminal, who when was later incarcerated because of that, the crime stopped. But the Sheriff's Department back in Sacramento thought that it was all connected, but there was not enough evidence to cross-reference and nothing to prove it was in fact committed by one man. Even though the crimes have stopped, the people of California were already scarred by the atrocities committed by this one man. He changed how people thought. They attended meetings on how to keep your doors and windows locked at night. A true crime author wrote a book in which she coined the name the Golden State Killer to the man who rained terror on the Golden State. But who was this man who shook the Golden State, scaring people for decades? He was the monster in the dark that everyone was afraid of, the boogeyman of California. For decades, police and forensic labs had his DNA extracted from rape kits in their files. However, there wasn't much they could do with it. Some sheriff's departments of different jurisdictions started connecting the dots and connecting the crimes together based on MO lead investigator Paul Holes, who was a criminologist and started working on the East Area Rapist cases. His crime lab and the Southern California crime labs started collecting and analyzing the DNA, but they were using different equipment, and DNA technology in the 90s was at its early stages, which made it difficult to compare both samples. But finally, in 2001, it was official. It was finally confirmed that all the DNA connected from the East Area Rapist and the original Night Stalker were all committed by one man, the Golden State Killer. But that DNA was not in any criminal database maintained by U.S. law enforcement. It only confirmed that it was all done by one man. It seemed that they had reached a dead end. 15 years have passed and companies like 23andMe and GED Match were available, and they had huge databases on the internet filled with the DNA of millions of people, and it was open to the public to upload and then compare their DNA and find long-lost relatives. Paul Holes uploaded the DNA of the Golden State Killer and finds a few matches, but those could be of distant relatives like third or fourth cousins. Holes and other investigators started working with a genealogist and started narrowing down people who could be the Golden State Killer by eliminating women, focusing on a certain age group, and people with ties to California. They had 5 suspects, but to be sure they needed to get some of their DNA and compare it to the one they had. They followed them for days, waiting for them to throw out anything with their DNA on it, because according to the law, any publicly discarded item they could grab, they could analyze. And finally, after 40 years, they had found their man. On April 24, 2018, Sacramento County Sheriff's deputies arrested the 72-year-old Joseph James D'Angelo, a former police officer in Auburn and Exeter, California.
Joseph James D'Angelo has been called a lot of things by law enforcement. He's been called the East Side Rapist. He's been called the Visalia Ransacker, the original Night Stalker, and the Golden State Killer. Today, it's our pleasure to call him defendant.
Before joining the police force, he served in the U.S. Navy and had returned and studied police sciences. From May 1973 to August 1976, he was a burglary unit police officer in Exeter, a town near Visalia, but was eventually fired from the police department when he was arrested for shoplifting a hammer and dog repellent. He was married to Sharon Marie Huddle and raised 3 daughters until they eventually separated. They had also bought a house together in 1980 in Citrus Heights, where he lived until he was arrested in 2018. He lived within the communities he terrorized for years, but his neighbors thought he was only an odd, meticulous man. His grass was always cut, but he had a bad temper. Some neighbors would catch him just yelling at nothing in the backyard, pacing in circles. After his arrest, D'Angelo could not be charged with rapes or burglaries because the statute of limitations had expired for those offenses, but he has been charged with 13 counts of murder and 13 counts of kidnapping. He faces either life without parole or death if convicted. In March 2020, he offered to plead guilty if the death sentence was taken off the table, but the prosecution refused. His trials would be one of the most expensive trials in the state of California and could go on for years until he is convicted. Which other stories do you want to hear next? Leave your suggestions down below, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more stories and click on the bell button to get notifications of future uploads.